What happens when power meets justice in the most unexpected way? A quiet highway, flashing red and blue lights. A black woman pulled over, treated like a criminal. But these officers had no idea who she was, because in less than 48 hours, the same woman would drag their entire police department into court and rip open the corruption they thought no one would ever see. The night was humid, the kind of summer heat that clings to the skin even after sunset. The hum of crickets was broken suddenly by sirens piercing the highway's silence. A sleek black sedan slowed down, pulling over to the side of the road. Behind it, 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop, red and blue lights dancing against the asphalt. Inside the car sat Judge Amara Lewis, a respected federal judge in the United States. But in that moment, she wasn't treated like one. She was treated like a suspect. One officer, tall, white, and carrying a smirk of arrogance, stepped to her window, license and registration. Now, his voice wasn't just commanding. It dripped with suspicion, the kind reserved for someone they already decided was guilty. Judge Lewis calmly handed over her license. The officer glanced at it, chuckled under his breath, then looked back at her. "You expect me to believe this? You? A judge? Don't make me laugh." The second officer circled her car, shining a flashlight into every corner, as though searching for contraband. Inside, Judge Lewis kept her composure. Her years in the courtroom had taught her restraint, but her hands tightened on the wheel. She knew what was happening. This wasn't about a broken taillight or speeding. This was about power, abuse of it, and they had no idea who they had just pulled over. The officers pulled her out of the car. Chains rattled as they cuffed her wrists on the side of the highway, in full view of passing cars. One driver slowed down, phone out, recording. "Yo, that's crazy. She's not even resisting." But the officers didn't care. They shoved her against the hood. "You people think you're above the law," one officer muttered, pressing down on her shoulder. Amara's eyes burned with fire. She whispered, not to them, but to herself, "No, I am the law." At the precinct, they sat her down like any other suspect. The officers didn't bother to check her credentials. They didn't bother to call their chief. But Amara didn't panic. She observed. She listened. The walls of that police station carried secrets. Phones ringing with complaints. Officers laughing the corner about another one off the streets. And Amara knew this wasn't just about her. This was about an entire system. Hours later, the desk sergeant finally glanced at her ID again. His face went pale. "Wait, Judge Amara Lewis?" The room fell silent. The officers who had mocked her shifted uncomfortably. The arrogance drained from their faces. "Ma'am, this is just a misunderstanding," one stammered. But Amara leaned forward, her voice sharp, cutting through the air like a gavel striking wood. "No, this is abuse of power. And starting tomorrow morning, this department will answer for it, in court." The silence was deafening. Every officer in that room realized their lives, their careers, their entire department had just changed forever. And this was only the beginning. The morning sun cut across the skyline, golden rays spilling into the courthouse windows. Judge Amara Lewis stood tall, her wrists still faintly red from the cuffs that had bound her the night before. She wasn't walking into her courtroom today as the judge who passed sentences. She was walking in as a woman seeking justice against the very people sworn to protect it. The news had already broken. Television, federal judge arrested by local police officers, mistaken identity or abuse of power. Television, civil rights leaders call for investigation after Judge Lewis detained on highway. Outside, cameras swarmed. Protesters lifted signs. Justice for Amara. End police corruption. No one is above the law, not even cops. As she stepped into the courthouse, reporters shoved microphones toward her. "Judge Lewis, what happened last night? Will you be pressing charges? Are you filing a federal inquiry?" She stopped, looked straight into the sea of flashing cameras, and said only 5 words. "This fight isn't about me." And with that, she walked inside. Inside her chambers, Amara spread stacks of files across her desk. Each folder represented complaints ignored, victims silenced, misconduct buried under paperwork. She had seen it before. Citizens claiming harassment, brutality, wrongful arrests, cases dismissed, evidence lost. But now, she had more than paper. She had experience. She had been in the chains herself. Her assistant, Daniel, rushed in. "Judge, the press is all over this. But you need to be careful. These officers, they'll come after you. They won't just roll over." Amara looked up, her tone firm. "Daniel, the law isn't a weapon for the powerful. It's a shield for the people. If I back down now, every victim they've silenced will stay silent forever." Across town, the police chief slammed his fist on the desk. The same officers who had arrested Amara stood before him, sweat trickling down their foreheads. "Do you fools realize what you've done?" the chief roared. "She's not just a judge, she's a federal judge. You've handed her the match to burn this entire department down." One officer stuttered, "Chief, we didn't know." She looked suspicious. The chief cut him off. "Suspicious? Do you know how this looks on the news? 2 white cops dragging a black federal judge out her car in chains? This is a mistake. This is a scandal." But Amara's words from a night before still echoed. "Tomorrow morning, this department will answer for it." And now that morning had come. By noon, the courtroom was packed. Activists, journalists, citizens. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when a judge put the police on trial. Amara sat at the plaintiff's table, not on the bench. It was surreal. The very room she presided over was now the stage for a fight. The opposing counsel smirked, whispering, "This will blow over. Public memory is short." But when Amara rose to speak, the entire room fell into silence. She began slowly, her voice steady but filled with fire. "Last night, I was handcuffed, humiliated, and treated as less than human, not because I broke the law, but because of the color of my skin. These officers didn't see a judge. They didn't see a citizen. They saw a target. And this is not about me. It's about every person who has suffered in silence under the weight of abuse of power." The gallery erupted in applause before the gavel struck for order. But the spark had been lit. That night, Amara returned home. For the first time in years, she felt a chill crawl down her spine. A black SUV idled across the street, headlights off. A phone call came in, no voice, just silence. Then a letter slipped under her door. In red ink, just 5 words. "Drop it or else." Amara held the note in her hands, her jaw tightening. She whispered into the darkness, "I'm not afraid of shadows. I've seen worse in daylight." But deep inside, she knew the fight had just escalated. This was no longer just a legal battle. It was a war for survival. The city didn't sleep that night. News channels replayed the footage of Judge Amara's arrest, her wrists in chains, her voice echoing in the courtroom. Her name had become a rallying cry. Judge Amara Lewis takes on police corruption. Will this case change America's justice system forever? But for Amara, the fame meant nothing. Fame doesn't protect. Fame doesn't guarantee safety. And as the black SUV outside her house revved its engine again before disappearing into the night, she knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, Daniel, the young assistant who had stood by her side, rushed into her chambers, pale and shaking. "Judge, they broke into my apartment last night. My laptop's gone. All my case files, everything." Amara's eyes narrowed. "They're trying to erase the evidence." But Daniel shook his head. "Not just that. They left something behind." He pulled a crumpled photograph from his jacket. It was a picture of Amara taken just a night before, sitting by her window, unaware, reading files. The message was clear. "We're watching you." For the first time, Amara's calm cracked. A flicker of fear crossed her face, but only for a second. Then it hardened into resolve. "Then we fight harder." That same evening, Amara met someone in secret, a man who had once worn the same badge as those who had arrested her, Officer Malik Johnson. He was black, mid-40s, with tired eyes that had seen too much. He kept his voice low as they sat in the back of a dimly lit diner. "They're not just covering up your arrest," Malik whispered. "They've been running an entire network. Illegal searches, fake arrests, evidence planted to boost their numbers. People disappear in this city, Judge, and nobody asks questions. Amara leaned in. Do you have proof? Malik slid a flash drive across the table. Everything's on here. Body cam footage they thought they deleted. Reports they buried. Names of officers. Dates. Times. It's all there. Amara took it carefully, her fingers brushing the cold metal. This wasn't just evidence. It was dynamite. Why give this to me? She asked softly. Malik's eyes darkened. Because I've got 2 sons. And if they grow up in a city where cops can get away with anything, then they'll never be safe. Not even if they follow every law in the book. For a moment, the weight of his words hung heavy between them. Then Amara nodded. You've just changed everything. But the police weren't sitting idle. Inside the precinct, the chief met with his inner circle. Papers were burned, hard drives smashed, and the 2 officers who had arrested Amara sat at the table, pale with fear. She's building a case, the chief growled. If she wins, this department crumbles. Our careers? Gone. Our pensions? Gone. You think the city will protect us? One officer whispered, What do we do? The chief leaned forward, voice cold as steel. You silence her before she silences us. That night, Amara was driving home when the headlights of a black truck appeared in her rearview mirror. At first, it followed at a distance. Then it accelerated. Her heart raced as the truck swerved, trying to force her off the road. She gripped the wheel, adrenaline surging. Not tonight, she muttered. She swerved, braked hard, and managed to spin her car into a side street. The truck roared past, disappearing into the night. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed sharp. She knew what this meant. The case had become a war. 2 days later, the courtroom was electric. Protesters filled the steps outside. Inside, the press filled every bench. Amara stood, holding the flash drive Malik had given her. She addressed the judge overseeing the case. Your Honor, what I hold in my hand is not just evidence of misconduct. It is proof of a department-wide conspiracy to target, humiliate, and destroy lives for power and profit. She plugged the drive into the projector. The screen flickered. Grainy body cam footage appeared. Officers laughing as they planted drugs in the back seat of a teenager's car. An innocent man shoved to the ground. Paperwork later altered to call him violent. Audio of the same 2 officers who had arrested Amara boasting about teaching people their place. Gasps filled the courtroom. The jury leaned forward. The reporters scribbled furiously. But Amara wasn't done. This isn't about one bad night. This is about years of abuse, years of silence. And tonight that silence ends. Outside the courthouse, shadows gathered. The SUV was back. Officers whispered into radios. Phones buzzed with encrypted messages. The department wasn't going down without a fight. And Amara knew the next move they made wouldn't be in the courtroom. The night air was thick with tension as Amara stepped out courthouse. The chants of protesters still echoed in her ears. The flashbulbs of reporters still burned in her eyes. And the weight of the flash drive she had revealed still pressed against her thoughts like a ticking bomb. She had just exposed what no one dared to expose, and in doing so, she had painted a target on her back larger than she had ever imagined. She slipped into her car, her driver Daniel behind the wheel. He looked at her through the mirror, his jaw tight, his face pale. Judge! That wasn't just evidence. That was a declaration of war. They're not going to take this lying down. Amara leaned back in her seat, the leather cold against her skin. I know, but I can't stop now. If I back down, if I let fear win, then they've already silenced every victim who came before me, and they'll silence the ones who come after. The car pulled away from the courthouse, swallowed by the night. But they weren't alone. 2 black SUVs slid out of the shadows, headlights off, keeping their distance but never too far. Daniel noticed first, glancing at the rearview mirror. They're tailing us. Amara turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing at the dark silhouettes. Drive. Don't let them corner us. The city streets twisted and turned, neon lights flashing across their windshield, the sound of engines behind them growing louder. The SUVs closed in. One pulled to the left, the other to the right. A classic trap. Daniel's hands gripped the wheel. They're trying to box us in. Don't let them. He swerved hard, the tires screeching as the sedan darted down a narrow alleyway. Trash cans toppled, cats scattered, but the SUVs followed. One of them clipped a corner, sparks flying as metal scraped against brick. Amara's pulse raced, but her voice was steady. Faster. Daniel pushed the car harder, weaving through the back streets until finally bursting back onto a main road. Traffic lights glowed red ahead. Daniel didn't stop. He blew through the intersection, horns blaring, tires skidding. Behind them, one SUV braked too late and slammed into an oncoming truck. The sound of crunching metal echoed through the night, but the other SUV kept coming. Amara looked over her shoulder, her jaw tightening. They won't stop, not until they think I'm buried. Finally, Daniel swerved into an underground parking garage. He killed the headlights, cutting the engine. The SUV roared past, its driver unaware they had slipped into shadows. In the sudden silence, Amara exhaled slowly, her hands trembling for the first time in days. Daniel looked at her, his voice low but firm. "Judge, this isn't just intimidation anymore. They're trying to kill you." She met his gaze, and in her eyes burned something stronger than fear. "Then let them try, because I won't stop until the truth is out." Hours later, back in her home, Amara sat alone in her study. The glow of her laptop screen lit her face as she scrolled through the files Malik had given her. Each video, each report, each name was another nail in the coffin of the department. The evidence was overwhelming, but also dangerous. She heard a floorboard creak behind her. She froze. Slowly, she turned her head. Nothing. Her mind told her it was paranoia, but her instinct screamed otherwise. She rose, moving quietly toward the window. A shadow shifted outside. Her phone buzzed suddenly, vibrating against the desk. A new message appeared. "You were warned. Next time we don't miss." Her chest tightened, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she saved a message, cataloging it as more proof. They thought threats would break her, but threats only sharpened her resolve. The next morning, the courthouse steps were flooded with protesters, crowds chanting her name, carrying signs of support, demanding justice. The air was electric, filled with hope and rage in equal measure. News vans lined the streets. The world was watching now. Inside the courtroom, Amara took her seat. Across from her sat the officers, their faces hard, their eyes cold. Their lawyers whispered furiously, their chief glaring from the gallery. But beneath their anger, Amara could see it, the cracks of fear spreading across their walls of arrogance. The judge presiding over the case asked if she was ready to proceed. Amara stood, her voice cutting through the silence. "Your Honor, this case isn't about a broken taillight or a single night gone wrong. This is about a system designed to protect itself, not the people. What we have uncovered isn't a mistake. It's a machine that destroys lives for power, profit, and control. And today, that machine faces its reckoning." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled faster. Even the jury leaned forward. The opposing counsel tried to object, their voices desperate, but the presiding judge silenced them with a wave of his hand. Amara continued, her tone sharper, louder. "They thought they could chain me. They thought they could silence me. But power doesn't belong to those who abuse it. It belongs to those who stand against it. And I will not stop until every hidden truth is dragged into the light." Applause broke out despite the gavel pounding for order. But even as the courtroom roared, Amara could feel eyes on her, cold, unblinking, dangerous. She glanced at the back of the room. A man in a black suit stood watching, his face expressionless, his presence chilling. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't press. He was something else. When the session adjourned, Amara stepped outside into the sea of flashing cameras. Protesters cheered, chanting her name louder than ever. But the man in the suit was gone. Back at her chambers, Malik appeared, his face grim. "They're not playing games anymore. Word is they've brought in someone from outside, a fixer, someone who makes problems disappear." Amara's eyes hardened. "Then they'll learn that I'm not a problem to erase. I'm a storm they can't contain." But even as she said it, the city outside seemed to hold its breath, because everyone knew The next move wouldn't come in court. It would come in the shadows. And in those shadows, the war for justice was about to reach its breaking point. The city was no longer silent. Every street corner hummed with chants. Every wall carried posters with Amara's face, and every television flickered with live updates of the most watched trial in decades. The courthouse had become a fortress, surrounded by barricades and armed guards, not to protect the officers on trial, but to protect the judge who had dared to stand against them. Amara sat in her chambers, staring at the files one last time. Her reflection in the window looked older than she remembered, heavier somehow, but her eyes still burned with the same fire that carried her through every threat, every shadow, every night of fear. Daniel entered quietly, setting down a steaming cup of coffee. He hesitated before speaking. "Judge, are you ready?" She looked at him, and for a rare moment, her voice softened. "I've been ready my whole life. I just didn't know it until now." The clock struck 9. It was time. The courtroom was overflowing, the air heavy with expectation. Journalists packed every bench. Cameras broadcast every second to millions watching worldwide. Protesters outside roared in waves, their chants rattling the windows. On the other side of the room sat the officers, their faces pale and drawn. The once smirking men who had dragged Amara in chains now looked like shadows of themselves, their arrogance drained by months of damning evidence. The chief sat behind them, sweat beading his forehead, his eyes darting nervously. The presiding judge entered and silence fell. The jury filed in, their expressions unreadable. The verdict was about to be read. Amara's chest rose and fell slowly. This was it, the moment that would decide not just her fight, but the fight of everyone who had suffered in silence. The foreman of the jury stood, holding the slip of paper in trembling hands. The room held its breath. "We, the jury, find the defendants guilty on all counts." The words exploded to the courtroom like thunder. Gasps, cheers, cries, an eruption of sound. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled, fists pumped in the air. The officers slumped in their seats, faces ashen. The chief buried his face in his hands. But Amara did not cheer. She stood slowly, turning to face the gallery. The people had waited to hear her speak, and when her voice rose, it silenced the chaos. This was never about revenge. This was never about one night on a highway. This was about truth. For too long, power has been used as a weapon against the very people it is sworn to protect. But today, the law has spoken, not as a shield for the powerful, but as a sword for the people. She paused, her voice steady, her eyes burning into every camera lens, every officer, every citizen watching. Let this verdict be a reminder. Justice may bend, it may be delayed, it may even be chained, but it can never be silenced, not as long as we are willing to stand. The room erupted in applause, louder than before, raw and unstoppable. Outside, the chants turned into cheers that shook the very walls of courthouse. But the fight wasn't over yet. That night, Amara returned home. The house was quiet, the streets outside alive with celebration. She sat in her study, staring at the same flash drive that had started it all. On it was still more evidence, names, dates, connections reaching far beyond a single department. What she had uncovered was only the tip of the iceberg. Daniel appeared at the door, his voice hesitant. "Judge, do you think this will change everything?" Amara looked down at the flash drive, then back at him. This verdict changed one city. But the system is everywhere. And if we stop here, then we've only cut off one head of the Hydra. We have to keep going. Daniel swallowed. "Then where do we start?" Amara leaned back, her eyes shifting to the window, where fireworks lit the night sky in her name, and the chant of thousands filled the air. "We start tomorrow." Her phone buzzed. A new message. She opened it, expecting another threat, but instead, it was a single sentence from an unknown number. "You are not alone. We're ready to fight with you." She stared at the words, a faint smile breaking across her face for the first time in weeks. The storm had broken. The chains had fallen. But the war for justice was only beginning, and she would not fight alone. Amara's story closes with victory, but also with the truth. One verdict is not enough. It's a spark. And once lit, sparks can ignite a fire that can change the world.